Borat, I come from Kazakhstan. Can I say first, we support your war of terror? I now will sing our Kazakh national anthem to the tune of your national anthem. Listen. Kazakhstan is the greatest country in the world. All other countries are run by little girls. Kazakhstan is #1 exporter of potassium. Other Central Asian countries have inferior potassium. Kazakhstan is the greatest country in the world. All other countries is the home of the gays.
Today we are talking about American culture and political views. What does being American mean? What do our political parties stand for? Why do we have them? And to what degree do they hurt or help our American democracy? Because of course when we say America, we tend to forget America is North and South America, and even in North America's case, we're not including Canada or Mexico. We're talking about the United States. But I'm sure there are pictures, words, and people that come to mind when I say, what is America? Images of patriotism, apple pie, fireworks, bald eagles, historical moments, people, tragedies, wars, capitalism, amazing feats, atrocious acts, a childish Gambino song that's playing in my head as I lecture, or D, all of the above. Swedish economist Gunnar Myrdal wrote a book about this in the 1940s called The American Dilemma, stating while we uphold individualism, civil liberties, and equality of opportunity as an American creed, that directly conflicts with American behavior, such as denying Black Americans full citizenship. And in order to understand how we got here, let's get some context for when this idea of an American way of life first started. This idea of an American way of life with a nuclear family, a white picket fence, and a reaffirmation of individual responsibility was created in the 1940s.
Well, the dinner date has begun, and they're all happy about it. They converse pleasantly while Dad serves. I said pleasantly, for that is the keynote at dinner time. Pleasant, unemotional conversation helps digestion.
Developed during the Cold War with the creation of the House of Un-American Activities Committee, a committee meant to target communists. Now, I want to pause to just soak in how unique this committee was. You'd be hard-pressed to find the House of Un-British Activities or House of Un-Canadian Activities. And what was un-American? The answer was anything said or done that was against the current government. This committee and the Cold War gave creation to a blurred line of patriotism and nationalism that while we said we held up freedom, we were targeting people's freedom of speech.
It's unfortunate and tragic that I have to teach this committee the basic principles of Americanism. That's not the question.
But our differing views of liberty and equality and democracy have created different political ideologies today. For example, while many Americans believe everybody should be equal politically, they do not think it's as important that everyone should be equal economically. This brings us to our political views. We all fall on the spectrum of what it means to be conservative and liberal, but what those words mean today is very different from their classical definition. So let's start at the beginning with the classical definitions. A classical conservative favors strong government with strong laws. This was considered right-wing. A classical liberal, on the other hand, favors small government that grants people liberty and freedom to do what they wish. This was left-wing. We call these left-wing and right-wing because during the French Revolution, those who sat right of the king were loyal to him like right-hand men, and those who sat on the left wanted revolution. But today, modern conservatives favor small government, laissez-faire economics, laissez-faire meaning no government intervention in our market, and believe these two things will grant people liberty.
For the most part, American conservatives believe in the free market and that it will provide the greatest economic opportunity and benefit to the greatest number of people. American conservatives usually support a strong defense. This is one place where we generally don't think spending should be cut. Most other programs, the things that fall under discretionary spending, can and should be left up to the private sector, and this will allow the government to reduce its spending. Lower spending, in turn, will mean lower taxes.
Modern liberals favor larger government to address inequality and protection of individual rights.
In general, American liberals believe that government can help solve problems. We like to see the government step in on behalf of consumers and to protect the environment, because in general, we don't trust that the free market will be fair to everyone. We know that protection of the environment, aiding the poor, and expanding civil liberties all cost money, so we usually favor a progressive tax system with higher taxes on the wealthy and corporations. Although not all American liberals are anti-business, as a rule, we don't have a lot of faith that big businesses have the average American's best interest at heart, and so we prefer to see them regulated. Although we still see national defense as important, most American liberals feel that the country spends more than enough on the military and that the defense budget should be cut, leaving more money for necessary social programs.
They switched. Why? You can thank Depression for that. The Great Depression. In the US, after the Great Depression, President Franklin Roosevelt felt that consumers had to be protected more than the producers. One historian, Arthur Schlesinger, wrote, "When the growing complexity of industrial conditions required increasing government intervention in order to assure more equal opportunities, the liberal tradition, faithful to the goal rather than to the dogma, altered its view of the state." For a liberal today, the government's goal means if you want to protect people's liberty, you have to maintain high levels of employment, increase standard of life, and establish social security. Others felt this was an abuse of government power and should be kept small to protect liberty. They became known as conservatives. This brings us to our political parties. Very quickly, for the sake of this class, when I refer to conservatives and liberals, I'm focusing on the modern definition. So political parties, what are they good for? Absolutely, something. A political party is a group with similar political beliefs united for a common goal. So what happens when you all come together with a shared political value? Do you hang out, eat pizza, dance? No! Political parties are the least fun type of party, or in the bottom three, somewhere between a Tea Party and a Tupperware party. The purpose of political parties is first organization, then campaigning to get people with their beliefs in office, educating others on political issues, funding to spread word about your candidate, and overall, to boost morale. In the US, we have two main political parties, Republicans and Democrats.
Political parties are an important force in American politics. They help people decide how they want the government to be run. Their aim is to get their candidates elected to public office to carry out these policies in state, local, or national government. You can show your support for a political party by voting, volunteering for a candidate, and supporting them on social media and at rallies and events. Just make sure your voice is heard, no matter which party you support.
Republicans are typically described as right-wingers or conservatives. There are kinds of conservative. Fiscal conservatives care about reducing taxes and deregulating businesses. National security conservatives who promote a more militaristic approach to foreign policy. And social conservatives who are chiefly concerned with value issues such as gay marriage or abortion. The Republican platform, thus, tends to focus on tax cuts, smaller governments, traditional social values, and a strong national defense.
The Republican Party calls itself the Party of Opportunity, referring to the idea that in the U.S. there should be equal pursuit of opportunity for all. To achieve this end, they believe there should be limited government interference in daily life as it leads to a better functioning state. The figurehead of the modern conservative movement, Ronald Reagan, explained it best. The 9 most terrifying words in the English language are,
"I'm from the government and I'm here to help."
Democrats are often called liberals or left-wingers. They broadly agree that government should be used to promote equal opportunity through policies such as universal health care and an increase in the minimum wage. On foreign policy, liberals tend to support strong diplomatic efforts before using military force. The Democratic platform focuses on a larger government for creation of social security programs and regulation of businesses, and higher tax rates to provide funding for social security programs.
Well, the modern Democratic Party traces its roots to the progressive President Franklin D. Roosevelt. At the height of the Great Depression, Roosevelt created Social Security and other big government programs meant to protect the unemployed and the working poor. Through government-sponsored public works projects, he created jobs and opportunities for those suffering from the stock market crash. Democrats advocate stricter government regulation on big business and larger participation in the social safety net. In March 2010, President Obama signed the Affordable Care Act into law, thereby increasing access to health care via government subsidies and decreasing the power of private insurers.
Now, while those are our two main political parties, at least a third of Americans are independents, unaffiliated with either major party. Some of them are moderates with a mix of liberal and conservative views depending on the issue. They often vote for a candidate rather than a party. Some independents might identify as libertarians. Libertarians basically want to be left alone. They favor minimal government and very little taxation.
And I know right now there's a debate over whether to wear masks and not masks. And just the fact that some people are saying, you know what, maybe it should be between us and the businesses we shop at. And that's what the Libertarian Party believes in.
The beauty of the Libertarian Party is it lets you choose. It's like right in the middle.
Almost all oppose government interference in private life. For example, many libertarians support the legalization of drugs and abortion. They also wish to get rid of the government's role in the economy, such as no federal minimum wage, to really create a free market. Then you have progressives. They are an emerging group on the left who so far seek to remake the Democratic Party, which they think has drifted too far to the right. They often believe in economic equality, more government regulations, and taxation. We've seen this group grow especially through the internet, from blogs to social media.
The American people understand and are seeing it incredibly clearly right now, in the midst of the pandemic, in the midst of the economic meltdown, that we need underlying fundamental changes in the way we do economics and healthcare and energy in the United States of America.
Now, when it comes to definitions in politics, nothing is written in stone. The definition dilemma is even greater for parties which are made up of smaller factions within the bigger faction. Now, I know what you're thinking. Estrada, how did we end up with basically two parties? I'll get there, but I want to give you the demographics of these groups today. So when we look at the demographics of each group, this is the current makeup of liberals and conservatives. Chances are, the younger you are, the more liberal you are. Pew Research shows that about 50% of millennials and Generation X identify with more liberal views. However, and this is common, the older you get, the more wealth you gain, the more assets you have, the more family you have to take care of, and your values can change. The liberals of today are potentially the conservatives of tomorrow. The liberal issues of today can look very different than just 20 years from now. Liberals of the future might be protesting the discrimination against robots. You might laugh, however, it might be a serious issue in the future. And another Pew survey from 2014 shows that predominantly white religious groups share Republican and conservative values, while predominantly minorities, millennials, and non-religious groups share Democratic or liberal values. The reasoning behind this can go back to another shift in parties in the 1960s, when the South started to favor terms like law and order and Christian values, and traditional state rights that valued segregation. Republicans started to cater towards these, while Democrats increasingly made up racial minorities.
To demand that the federal government not put a cent in this city unless it decides to face the realities of desegregation.
Then there is a gender gap between our two primary parties in the US. Overall, women identify more as Democrats than Republicans. One possible factor that contributes to this is the Democratic support of giving women the choice to have an abortion or not, while more Republicans believe abortion should be rare, if practiced at all, due to the belief that life starts at conception. The last primary difference in demographics is with education. The Republican Party sees an increasing amount of white voters with no college education. The Democratic Party has developed an image of elitism, and the attitudes towards college in general sour many who do not have money to attend because of the rising cost of tuition and the liberal bias that colleges receive.
As if you needed more proof that higher education is the most sophisticated and most predatory racket underway in this country right now, there's this. Harvard just announced its classes will be entirely online this fall, but the school isn't taking a single dime off its tuition. That's still $50,000 a year. Of course, it's by design.
This now makes education an increasing culture war zone. What's being taught and why has political consequences. So, where can Americans find common ground? A few places. economic policy, political participation, religion, and our overall views of government and the media. Now, before I start this, I'm not saying that everyone believes this, but these are common beliefs in the United States. If you live in San Francisco, California, chances are you're sipping on your organic free trade compostable coffee cup and saying, "I beg to differ." That's fine, you live in a bubble. But if you just came to the United States, here's a helpful guide. Let's start with economic philosophy. Americans value equality of opportunity over equality of results. This reinforces economic individualism and personal responsibility. You have the choice to pursue whatever you like. However, you are held responsible for any success or failure. The belief is if you become a millionaire, clearly you did something right, and if you're in debt, clearly you made the wrong choices. The conclusion here is if everyone has the same opportunity, then a vast difference in lifestyle and wealth is natural. This is also the core of free market economics and a capitalist system. People should have the liberty to pursue what they want and have ownership of the rewards. We can all start a business, but if you start a business that beats out any competition, you have the right to more wealth than others now. Now, the critique of equal opportunity is that it's not equal. Although we all technically can pursue what we want, some will inevitably have to work harder than others to go to a certain school, receive grants, loans, altogether resources to start a business. In a 2018 Gallup poll, 63% are satisfied with the opportunity to get ahead, meaning they believe they have what they need to succeed. However, only 32% were satisfied with the income and wealth distribution. So while people believe in equality of opportunity, they do not seem satisfied with the result. But it's the result that then creates the opportunity for your family and so on and so forth. Next, we have political participation. In 2016, 55% of eligible American voters voted in the last presidential election, landing us in 26th place of 32 developed nations. One of the big media pieces of 2004 was that more people voted in American Idol than they did in the presidential election. While a lot of context is missing from that statement, like there's no age for American Idol voters, the statement was clear: Americans do not vote. Why? A few possible reasons are lack of compulsory voting laws. What this means is in other nations, it's mandatory to vote or you face a fine or have to do some type of community service. But as you can tell, a few criticisms of this is that it goes against our principle of liberty, and you risk people unenthused or uneducated just bubbling in the first name on the ballot.
In Belgium, Australia, Brazil, and 19 other democracies, when you don't vote, you could suffer the consequences. Typically a fine at first. In some places, if you keep skipping out, you could lose your right to vote.
Quartz points to a groundbreaking comparative study which shows that countries that strongly enforce compulsory voting have populations that are more politically informed.
Another reason is disenfranchisement. Just because you're eligible to vote doesn't mean you have equal access to do so. Different states now have different voting laws in place that range from having a state issue ID, a registered car within the state, or an exact match voting policy, to name a few.
But the bill will also tighten up mail-in voting.
Definition of disability to qualify for a mail ballot: illness, injury, medical confinement.
A voter is now disabled only if the voter is not capable of appearing at the polling place on election day without help. Plus, there is now a tougher ID requirement. Mail-in ballots must have a driver's license number, personal ID number, last four of your social security, or an explanation of why you can't provide these. Finally, the bill ensures poll watchers will be able to have free movement in polling locations, though this was met with concern.
A poll watcher is entitled to observe any activity conducted under this section.
Yes, sir.
I'm not a lawyer, but doesn't that mean that the poll watcher is entitled to see what the voter is doing?
Another reason is people just do not feel inspired to vote and do not feel the candidates truly represent the people, or to quote Lindsey Graham when talking about choosing between Donald Trump and Ted Cruz for the 2016 Republican primary.
Whether it's death by being shot or poisoning, does it really matter? I don't think the outcome will be substantially different.
We also call this a clothespin vote, where we have to wear a pin on our nose to keep the stink of our democracy away. Yet, despite our lack of voting, Americans have a strong sense of political efficacy, meaning people believe they understand government and that they can influence government. How do we do this without voting? By donating, canvassing, protesting, signing petitions, calling and mailing our elected officials, and sharing and posting on social media are all forms of political participation. Now, what's most effective is debated and circumstantial. However, each is at least bringing attention to an issue. For religion is embedded into our politics. Our nation was founded on religious beliefs. Colonies were created based on religion. Although we are free to exercise the religion of our choice, we must recognize out of every 100 Americans, at least 65 identify as Christian. Although we tout separation of church and state, we must also know that we have one nation under God in our Pledge of Allegiance, and in God we trust on our money. Even today, politicians are expected to have some type of religious affiliation, because voters claim the one group they are least likely to tolerate in office are atheists.
Okay. You mentioned the Bible. You've been talking about how it's your favorite book, and you said, I think last night in Iowa, some people are surprised that you say that. I'm wondering what one or two of your most favorite Bible verses are and why.
I wouldn't want to get into it because to me that's very personal. You know, when I talk about the Bible, it's very personal, so I don't want to get into verses. I don't want to get into...
There's no verse that means a lot to you that you think about or cite?
The Bible means a lot to me, but I don't want to get into specifics.
So if you have 75% of Americans with some religious identity, religion often plays a part in your morals and values. Which brings us to our culture war in the United States. While the majority are religious in the US, we have cultural conflict like no other that has only reached new extremes due to social media. We get into fights over identity politics, vaccines, school prayer, weed, gay marriage, transgender rights, Starbucks cups, pornography, bent knees, saying Merry Christmas versus Happy Holidays, and all the Karen freakout videos in between. Each week, the media and people's attention focuses on a new story that draws a line within our culture, and what it comes down to is this. Hey, Albie. Our culture wars ask, what is the government's role in regulating personal lives? Should government follow a moral code? And if so, what does that code look like? Finally, the last piece that unites conservatives and liberals is one of the most American values of all, the challenge of authority. We were built on rebellion and the need to escape, and we are all quick to have suspicions about any institution that tells us what to do or informs us. We may like to learn, but we don't like to be taught. Even as I say this, some of you might be ready to challenge it. But research shows the two major institutions that the majority of Americans do not trust are 1, the government, 2, the media. Our distrust dates back to the 1960s with the Civil Rights Movement, the assassination of a president, the Vietnam War, and the overall rise of television.
You give us a question.
Don't be rude. No, I'm not going to give you a question. I'm not going to give you a question.
Can you state categorically?
You are fake news.
Sir,
go ahead.
Can you state categorically that nobody... No, Mr. President-elect, that's not appropriate.
So, why do we have two main political parties? While we all fall on the spectrum of conservative and liberal, it's difficult for Americans to fully align with one party over another. Our political parties make us compromise certain values and ask which ones matter most. We do have third parties, a plethora of them. Libertarian, Green, Whig, Socialist, we even have a Prohibition party and a rent is too damn high party. But since 1852, every president has been either a Republican or a Democrat. The main cause of this is because we have a winner-take-all election system. The candidate with the most votes wins, period.
The presidential candidate who wins the most votes receives its entire electoral college haul. So, using Florida as an example, in the 2008 election, Barack Obama beat John McCain by a mere 3 percentage points, but gained all of its 27 electoral college votes.
If you're a Republican in a Democratic state or a Democrat in a Republican state,
your vote is counted, and then it's thrown away because it means nothing.
That's why LULAC is taking 4 states to federal court.
File! Yippee! There it is. When I push that button, the whole course of history of how we elect the President of the United States is going to change.
The lawsuit is nonpartisan. 2 solidly Republican states, Texas and South Carolina, and 2 Democratic states, California and Massachusetts, are being sued over their systems of winner-take-all. In past elections, even though candidates like Hillary Clinton won the overall popular vote, Donald Trump was among those who won more votes in the Electoral College that ultimately decides presidential elections.
Another cause for our two-party system is that Republicans and Democrats receive the most funding and media attention. Now, this reasoning is circular and resembles a snake eating its own tail. Because Republicans and Democrats get the most attention, they get more funding, and the more funding they get, the more media attention they get. And all of these lead to my last point, which is because of the winner-take-all system, lack of funding, lack of media attention, Americans often say voting for a third party is a wasted vote. Why bother? Why vote for C if you know it's going to be A or B? Overall, does having political parties help or hinder our democracy? The result is it's easier to categorize us. It's easier for funding, for knowledge. It's a quick cheat sheet to a candidate. However, it's no place for nuance, especially with a two-party system. So we're left to grapple with two parties that often villainize and mock the other.
Because the question is, radical left. Will you shut up, man? Listen, who is on your list, Joe? Who's on your list?
Gentlemen, I think we've ended this.
He's going to pack the court.
We have ended this segment.
It's easy to think whatever side you're on, the other is the enemy.
President, can you let him finish, sir?
No, he doesn't know how to do that. He has, you pick the wrong guy, the wrong night at the wrong time.
You're right. You know you're right. Based on your experience, where you grew up, your family, your friends, your school, what you've been exposed to, you're right, and the other side is wrong. There are plenty of things to mock about American culture, and there are plenty of outrageous things said by politicians or voters that we then chalk up to being the image of a liberal or a conservative. However, where we find empathy, we can find common ground. Where there's context about why we are who we are, where there are questions instead of accusations, there is space for discussion and understanding, and maybe, just maybe, even compromise. Politics are so passionate because it's a story of power and identity. We connect politics to our identity.
Never thought in my lifetime that it would happen, but it happened tonight. It's a reality and we did it. America is now more united. We did it.
Because I can't believe that I got the opportunity to live to see something so great. Like, I can't describe it. I can't believe I got the chance to vote for the first black president.
So when we fight about politics, we're fighting about ourselves. I understand if any media organization and our political parties profit off of people's anger and fear. I understand how easy it is to take someone out of context for a viral soundbite. The hard thing to do is to pull someone aside, learn about them, talk to them, and share. But in order to make this great experiment of democracy matter, in order to make it work, we have to do the hard thing. Thank you for watching. Godspeed.